What's up YouTube, 'tis I Chaddington, and we are back with another reaction video. So I learned a lot about Australia so far, but I have been curious about how the government works. How similar is it to the US or maybe to Britain? How different is it? Do they have any crazy practices or anything going on over there? Do they have those shouting matches in the middle of Parliament like the Brits do?
Order! Order!
So today we're watching How the Australian Government Works by Ozpol Explained. Shout out to their channel, link in the description below. Now this person is Australian. I've gotten so much flack on this channel before for listening to Australia explanations by people who aren't Australian, but this person is Australian, so hopefully we get some correct information. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and without further ado, let's go.
Hello, and welcome to Ozpol Explained. I'm David, and I'll be helping you understand everything you need to know about Australian politics. For any blind people listening in, I'm Caucasian. I have medium-length reddish-brownish curly hair and a short beard and moustache. This will help you visualize me, as well as describe me to Crime Stoppers. Welcome to my channel. In today's video, we're going to be discussing how does the Australian government work? Like, what are the moving parts? What are the key roles? Why is there a green and a white piece of paper during elections? If you don't know anything about Australian politics, this
Well, that's news to me. I don't know about any green or white piece of paper.
is going to be incredibly helpful to you. Let's begin. So the different key political positions in Australia are as follows: the Queen or Monarch, the Governor-General, the Prime Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, Ministers and Shadow Ministers, Members, Senators, and the Crossbench.
Hold up. Did he say Queen or Monarch? Who's the Queen of Australia? Are they talking about like the Queen of England? Is she still, well, she's not around anymore, but is Britain still in charge of Australia? Because that would be news to me. I knew that Australia was a British colony back in the day, but I assume they completely split. So maybe we'll learn about that here.
So let's start with the top down. We all know who the Queen is, right? God bless Lizzie. For the sake of future-proofing this video, we're going to refer to that position simply as the monarch. The monarch.
Nah, it's too late for that, man. You just said God bless Lizzie and she's dead, so moving on.
On the advice of the Prime Minister, appoints the Governor-General. See, because Australia is still part of the Commonwealth, our head of state is anyone who is in charge of the monarchy. Currently that is Queen Elizabeth, who is the monarch of Australia and England and a bunch of other places, and has been since 1952. This is because we were historically colonised by the British, which is its whole bag of apples. Hypothetically speaking, the monarch does actually still have the legal ability to interfere with what laws do and don't get passed in Australia, but also, the monarch doesn't do that. That's also a lot of...
Okay, so that's interesting. So hypothetically, the monarch could have influence still in Australia. That is surprising. I wonder what that would look like if, I don't know, I guess it's King Charles on the throne in England right now, right? If he went into Australia and like started yelling at people and trying to make changes, does he actually have any power, or is it just kind of like a figurehead type situation?
work, and England a long time ago decided, screw it, let Australia and the other Commonwealth countries just run themselves. And that's where the Governor-General comes in. The Governor-General is the monarch's representative and is the final step in making sure things pass into law, in a process called royal assent. This is basically a fancy way of saying, hey, I give my stamp of approval. That's a law now.
Hold on, is the Governor-General appointed by the monarch or by the people of Australia? I've got to go back and hear that again.
Is the monarch's representative and is the final step in making sure things pass into law.
Okay, so the monarch's representative.
The Governor-General also has a bunch of other roles, including issuing dates for elections on the advice of the Prime Minister and appointing ministers, also on the advice of the Prime Minister. When a new Prime Minister is elected, they go to the Governor-General and to be officially sworn in to being PM. The Governor-General actually has a lot of powers, but I will be expanding upon that in a whole other video, so please do subscribe to learn about that later.
Okay, so it doesn't sound like the Governor-General is totally hands-off. It sounds like he kind of is monitoring the situation. If this person is appointed by the monarch, then I guess they are kind of still involved, maybe in not a direct way, but yeah, it seems complicated. But yeah, this is all surprising to me. I thought that maybe there was some kind of Australian Independence Day or something. But yeah, maybe that's just an American thing. I encourage all Australians, rise up and claim your freedom. That was just a joke, people. I am not calling for revolution. Do not come at me in the comments, please.
And this brings us to the Prime Minister. We've all heard that role. The Prime Minister is the head of a party or a coalition of parties that has a majority of seats in the House of Representatives. A coalition, by the way, is a formal grouping of two or more parties. For example, the Liberal Party and the National Party have a coalition called the Coalition, and they are best friends and they vote together on bills and stuff. It's comprised of the Liberal Party, the National Party, and the Queensland branch, which formally merged into the Liberal National Party. So it's the Liberal National Party. If you hear the terms coalition, they're most likely referring to them. Saying the two main parties when it's like Labor and then three others is technically wrong, but functionally correct. Sort of. As the population changes, so do the amount of seats in the House of Representatives. So there are currently 151 seats, meaning that to form a majority government, a party needs 76 seats minimum. However, a government does not need a majority in the Senate, and actually quite often doesn't. We'll get back to that in a moment. The Deputy Prime Minister fills in for the Prime Minister whenever they are away or otherwise incapacitated. This is called being the acting Prime Minister. Insert joke here about theatre. I can't think of one. If the Deputy Prime Minister is also busy, another senior minister can fill in for the role. For example, one time, former Liberal Deputy Leader Julie Bishop filled in as acting Prime Minister while Malcolm Turnbull was away. The Prime Minister is not...
Okay, this is kind of similar to the US in the sense that we have the President, the Vice President, and then the next in line is the Speaker of the House. That is the next highest ranking government official. So it's like if one of the higher people become incapacitated, then the next person takes over. And in the American government, it goes like all the way down through the entire president's cabinet, which is like, I don't know, like 12 people at least or something. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, it's like a lot of people.
Not the same as a president. In places like the US, the president is elected in their own election. Prime ministers, on the other hand, are leaders of a party. A party chooses its leader and therefore can actually dismiss its leader from the position of prime minister without an election.
Oh, that's interesting. That makes sense now because all the things I've heard about British politics and their prime minister is now starting to make sense, where they like vote people in and out. So I guess it's the same way in Britain. They vote for parties and then the party picks the prime minister. Huh. That is an interesting way of doing things. I've never thought of the American system as that different before, but so this is all kind of mind-blowing to me.
An example of this is when Kevin Rudd was replaced by Julia Gillard as leader of the Labour Party and therefore as Prime Minister. And then the same in reverse. And then Tony Abbott won an election, but then before his term was up, Malcolm Turnbull became Prime Minister by like the whole leadership spill thing. And then again with Scott Morrison. Remember that? Remember the past 12 years where no Prime Minister has actually successfully managed to complete a full term? Australian politics, what can you say?
Hold on. What? Let me hear that again.
Actually successfully Morrison. Remember that? Remember the past 12 years where no Prime Minister has actually successfully managed to complete a full term? Australian politics, what?
Wow. So at the time this video was filmed, for the past 12 years, not a single prime minister made it through a full term. That is crazy. I wonder what you guys think about that, because at least in America, regardless of who the president is, there's some level of stability because like Congress can technically get rid of the president, but it's pretty complicated. But yeah, for the most part, they're pretty much in there. And I wonder which system is better, which system is more resilient against a tyrannical leader. I mean, obviously the Australian system is, because they can be voted out more easily, it seems. But that comes at the expense of maybe some extra political strife, and there can be instability in that.
What can you say? So, like I said, the party chooses its leader. The Prime Minister therefore goes to election like the rest of the members and has to win in their own electorate in their own right. Hypothetically speaking, a party can go to an election, win, but their party leader and therefore the former Prime Minister could lose their seat. This is hypothetical. It doesn't ever happen. Though John Howard did lose his seat in 2007, but also the Liberals lost their majority as well. Usually the party leader is chosen from a safe electorate with a wide margin, so the chances of them getting voted out is very, very slim. We have many political parties in Australia, but the main two are the Liberal Party, which is...
Hold up, he said the chances of them getting voted out is slim, but yet not a single prime minister has completed a full term. Maybe I missed something.
Usually the party leader is chosen from a safe electorate with a wide margin, so the chances of them getting voted out is very, very slim. We have...
Maybe that he's talking about the person who's like already the leader of the party, as opposed to like the prime minister necessarily.
Many political parties in Australia, but the main two are the Liberal Party, which is right-wing, and the Labor Party, which is a bit more centre.
Hold on, hold on. The Liberal Party is right wing. That scrambles my brain. Because in the US, we have conservative and liberal, and liberals are left wing and conservatives are right wing. So I have to make a switch in my mind here. So liberals are right wing in Australia. And what was the other one?
The Liberal Party, which is right-wing, and the Labor Party, which is a bit more centre.
Labor Party. I've heard of that term before, usually in Britain, because I know they have a Labor Party. So is Labor Party right wing in Britain too? No, left wing. Right, because liberals are right wing. Whew, it's going to take me a while to get used to that.
We also have the smaller party, the Nationals, which forms, like I said, a formal coalition with the Liberal Party, because without that, the Liberal Party would almost never be able to form enough seats to get a majority. The National Party is also right-wing, but is more focused on trying to get seats in the country. Sometimes these parties are in complete disagreement, which is called being partisan, and other times they are in complete agreement, which is called being bipartisan. The leader of whichever party has the second most amount of seats is the leader of the opposition. Currently, as I'm filming this video, Scott Morrison is the Liberal Prime Minister, which means that Labour leader Anthony Albanese is also sometimes called the leader of the opposition.
In the US, we call that the minority leader. So, for example, there will be the Senate majority leader and Senate minority leader. I don't think we have the same positions for the House of Representatives in the US. We have a Speaker of the House. That's the person who's like in charge of the House. But is there like a House Majority Leader and House Minority Leader? Probably. I think so. That sounds right.
When Julia Gillard, Labour Prime Minister, was in power in 2010, Tony Abbott, as the leader of the Liberal Party, was also known as the leader of the opposition. It goes back and forth. The government also appoints ministers. These are things like the Minister for Defence, Minister for Health, or Minister for Foreign Affairs. The amount of ministers and their titles vary over time, and so the Minister of Defence was once called the Minister for Air. Fun fact for you.
Okay, so that's equivalent to cabinet positions in the US. In the US, there's like, we call them secretaries, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Health and Human Services, stuff like that. So in Australia, they're called ministers. But presumably it's not a religious title, you know, because ministers are like pastors. Okay.
These ministers focus on the topic of their ministries, which is also called their portfolio. So for example, the Minister of Health focuses on formulating policy that is related to, say, hospitals. Ministers are referred to collectively as either the front bench or cabinet. Prime ministers and opposition leaders select their cabinet and can rearrange them basically whenever. When they get elected, after a scandal, when they've just survived a leadership spill, or just for fun. Sometimes it's to give their government a different image to their predecessors or to promote someone who is more qualified to a new position. Anyone who isn't given a special position is called the backbench, which is basically most of the government. They're still important though.
Interesting. So I wonder if in Australia, and he might go on to explain this, but if the cabinet members, I forget the term he used, but if they have to be voted in and confirmed by like the Senate, because in the US, every cabinet member has to be confirmed by the Senate. They're appointed by the president, but then confirmed by the Senate.
Getting laws to be passed is sometimes a numbers game, and so in special circumstances, every single backbencher has to be in the chamber to vote to make sure something passes or doesn't pass. This can be of the utmost importance whenever a government has a slim majority of just 1 or 2 seats. Now, the opposition party has their own ministers called shadow ministers. Ooh, how dark and moody. Ooh. Hi, I'm the shadow minister for defense. Sounds so much cooler. It just does. They help formulate their party's policies and are a good example of what you could get if you voted the other party into power in the next election. Hypothetically speaking, any party can become government. Hypothetically. Currently, the only parties that can get sufficient numbers in the House of Representatives are the Labour Party and the Coalition. In the past, we have had plenty.
And the Coalition, if I recall, it's the Liberal Party plus like the Nationalistic Party or something.
Of different parties produce prime ministers, like the Protectionist, Free Trade, Commonwealth Liberal, National Labour, Nationalist, Unite Australia, and Country Party. There was no way I was going to remember that all off by heart. In the future, we may actually see a different party form a majority government in the House of Representatives, though this would require a large shift in voter attitudes and a large growing popularity of a minor party. So don't expect that in the next few elections.
Yes, in the US, it's a two-party system. It's just the Republicans and Democrats. They have had all the power for many, many decades now. Well, technically, since the start, we've pretty much always been a two-party system. There is a third party called the Green Party, but they have never won an election, never even gotten close. And I don't know if there are still members of Congress who are part of the Green Party. Maybe there's like one or two, but I don't know. But yeah, it's a two-party system. And I know there's a lot of debate on whether or not there should be more parties to get, new ideas, different kinds of representation. But the parties are so entrenched that, in my opinion, I don't think it's ever going to change.
Fortunately, though, if you do vote for a minor party, they have a far greater success of getting into the Senate. We will touch on that in just a moment. So let's address what happens if there is no majority. It happens, and it's called a hung parliament. When it happens, a party trying to become a government needs to settle up to some minor parties and independents and go, hey, want to give me confidence and supply, please? And they hopefully go, sure, let's form a coalition. Or they go, nah, at which point the Governor General most likely will be like, hey, we don't have a government, so it's a new election for you all. In 2010, Julia Gillard, Labour Prime Minister, actually had a hung parliament. She had to saddle up to a couple of independents and one Greens MP, Adam Bant, to form a coalition. Despite this, she actually managed to get a lot of legislation passed. In the early years of Australia, we actually...
What do you Australians, for you Australians watching the video, what do you guys think about having these smaller parties around in addition to the two main parties? Do you like that or not so much?
We had quite a few parties, and it took us a while to get a majority of just one. In 1906, there was this weird three-way split where the Protectionist Party had 21 seats, the Anti-Socialists had 24, and the Labour Party had 26. This had to be resolved by 2/3 of them banding together. Well, what are other parties doing if they're not in the House of Representatives? Well, we are finally getting to the Senate. Like I said,
I have to say, all of that does seem more entertaining than just having a straight two-party system. People are always like forming alliances and everything's always shifting. Maybe it's not the most productive system, but it does seem like a Game of Thrones episode or something.
Small parties can actually get a boost in the Senate compared to the House of Representatives. And to learn why, we need to discuss elections. Ooh, yes, I love a good strong election. Federal elections in Australia are not on a fixed date. State and local elections, on the other hand, are, so pay attention to that. Federal elections have a time in which they must absolutely be called by, but are often called earlier by a Prime Minister, as approved by the Governor General. Voting in federal elections is compulsory, and if you don't, you can be fined. So please vote. Elections are...
Wait, what? Voting is compulsory?
Voting in federal elections is compulsory, and if you don't, you can be fined. So please vote.
What? That is shocking. So every Australian citizen has to vote in a federal election, and if they don't, they get fined. That is crazy. I don't think that would work over here in the US. There's just too many people, and you would have to fine like tens of millions of people. Well, who knows? Maybe that could be a good way to raise some more tax dollars for the federal government. But wow, yeah, I'm surprised to hear that. I didn't know they did that in Australia. Do you guys like that in Australia? I feel like most people are going to say no. They don't want to be like forced to vote. It is a funny idea, being forced to vote. It's like, you will do your democratic duty. I'll force you to do it. It's kind of like a weird, like cognitive dissonance situation.
Elections are handled by the Australian Electoral Commission, which you can visit their website by going to www.aec.gov.au. The AEC is your friend. It is your number one stop for everything election related, and it is even translated to several different languages. Seriously, just bookmark it. Go to it to register to vote, update your enrollment details if you have moved house recently, go there to ask a question about how to vote outside of your electorate, if you're out of the country, if you're homeless, if you have a disability, anything. Just go see the aec.gov.
Just go. Sorry, I cannot do the Australian accent, but I tried.
.au website. You can use it also to find out which electorate you live in. You can even use the AEC to register as an independent candidate in the next election. You can do so much thanks to the AEC. The AEC wants to make voting as accessible as possible because it is compulsory. Even scientists in research stations in Antarctica have to vote. To vote in elections,
Wow.
you do have to register with the AEC. You can register as young as age 16, even though the legal voting age is 18. So if you get it done right now, you'll be done and ready if an election is called tomorrow. So let's get back to the purpose of elections. The House of Representatives and the Senate is what we refer to as the two houses. No one lives there, we'd just call them houses. The Senate is known as the upper house, and therefore the House of Representatives is known as the lower house. We call this because we borrowed this off the British. Why the British call that, I don't know. Please tell me.
I assume that America borrowed it off the British as well, because we have a House of Representatives and a Senate.
If you know, please. Currently there are 76 seats in the Senate and 151 in the House of Representatives, much like Generation 1 Pokemon. Is the Prime Minister Mew? This number, much like
Much smaller number than, well, not much smaller, but a smaller number than the US. We have 100 senators and 435 members of the House of Representatives, but then again, we have like a 10 times bigger population.
the amount of Pokemon has gradually grown over time. During the first federal election of 1901, there were only 75 seats for the House of Representatives and 35 seats for the Senate. Electorates are divided into comparable sizes of population, not area, population. So inner city electorates are tiny, whereas country electorates are really chunky and big. Currently, Australia's smallest electorate is that of Cranler, which is an inner southern metropolitan area in Sydney, and it covers just a small area of 32 square kilometres. 32 square kilometres! You're thinking, oh, that's more than I care to walk around in one day. And then there is the largest, Durack, which takes up 64% of the landmass of Western Australia. It is over 1.6 million square kilometres. That is approximately the size of Iran or Mongolia. That is an
Dang.
electorate approximately the size of the 17th largest country in the world, represented by one person. That's because Western Australia is full of desert, and therefore the population is very sparse and spread out. For more electorate comparisons, the Northern Territory only has 2 electorates, whereas New South Wales has 47. That's because there are a lot of people in New South Wales, whereas in Northern Territory, crocodiles have yet to be given the right to vote. So this is where we get members. Technically,
Okay, so hold on. So what I'm thinking about here is the system in the US for presidential elections called the Electoral College. This is a system that gives essentially smaller population areas of the country more of a say as opposed to population dense areas. And this is designed so that population dense areas like on the coasts that have a tendency to all have a similar political beliefs don't end up controlling every election. So it doesn't seem from what he's saying like there's any system like that in Australia. Maybe you think that's a good thing and it should just be based on, popular vote. The population should choose how to run the government. But maybe you think that larger territories with smaller populations should have more of a say.
anyone in either house is a member of parliament, but to further distinguish them, there is members and then there are senators. Members campaign in their local area and they need to win over the majority of votes. And because they are campaigning in basically a similar location, potentially a very small geographical area, there are overlapping interests with the majority of their constituents. For example, very wealthy suburbs tend to be safe Liberal seats because Liberals like cutting taxes to the wealthy, whereas country and rural seats tend to more often vote for the Nationals. Like I said, only
Hold on, but the Liberals are conservative, right? So I'm surprised that population dense, wealthy areas vote for conservatives because in America, all the big cities are super left wing. So that is very surprising. I mean, a city like Sydney isn't going to be conservative, right? Hold on, maybe I misunderstood what he said.
For example, very wealthy suburbs tend to be safe Liberal seats
Oh, he said wealthy suburbs. Okay.
because Liberals like cutting taxes to the wealthy, whereas country and rural seats tend to more often vote for the Nationals.
No, but he's also saying country areas tend to vote for the Nationals.
Like I said, only one member is elected per electorate. When you go to the polling booth or do a postal vote due to special circumstances, there will be two pieces of paper. The House of Representatives is the green one. The candidates will be in random order, and you must fill in every single box with a number from 1 until however many boxes there are. You do this in whichever order you prefer the candidates to be in. The
Ranked choice voting.
Senate, on the other hand, is a little bit different. It comes with a white piece of paper, which can be quite massive. There are 12 Senate seats for each state, and 2 for the Northern Territory and Australian Capital Territory. This means for the states that you don't need a majority of votes, you just need to get a quota. This also means that your voter base doesn't need to be concentrated in just one area. This is what allows minor parties, like say the Greens, to get more votes in the Senate and actually gain seats. This is why, as I film this, there are 9 Greens in the Senate, whereas there is only 1 in the House of Representatives.
So hold on. So for the Senate, every person votes for the entire country for the Senate. They all rank the Senate candidates based on who they want to see in there. And so that's why it's more likely that a smaller party member is elected to the Senate. I think that's what he's saying. Huh. That's an interesting system.
So why is the Senate paper so big? Well, this is because multiple people from the same party can potentially get a quota. So that's why some parties will have 3, 4, maybe even 6 candidates. The piece of paper is divided by a line that goes horizontally across the entire thing. Above the line is simply a list of all the parties. Below the line is a list of every single candidate attached to those parties. There are 2 ways to vote on the Senate paper. The first is called voting above the line, where you must mark at least 6 boxes. You may mark more if you so wish. The next one is called voting below the line. This is where you must number at least 12. You must do one or the other. Above the line, you are simply picking the parties, and the person who gets elected is based off their preference of who goes down the line in the boxes below. If you want to vote below the line, this allows you to have more control over your preferences. This means that you can vote for a specific person in the party ahead of another person in the party, or you can simply vote for just one person in that party and then put the rest of your preferences into other candidates of other parties.
Got it. So the only similar thing I can think of in the US, and by the way, I'm just always comparing to the US because that's what I am familiar with, so that's why I'm comparing stuff. But so there's 2 parties in the US, the Republicans and Democrats, and when you vote, you can like check an option which is a straight Republican ticket or a straight Democrat ticket. So that means you just vote Republicans all the way down or Democrats all the way down. And that's what I would imagine most people do.
It is your vote, and you have as much control over it as you wish. Keep in mind that sometimes the way to vote changes. Only a few years ago,
Yeah, also, by the way, this is a very different system. It's very interesting how it works. It's kind of like you can choose the amount of control you want to have. I'm curious the percentage of people who like really get into the details and are picking certain individuals over others.
you had to fill in every single box if you wanted to vote below the line in the Senate, and sometimes there can be over 70 boxes. The good news is, if you do make a mistake before you cast your ballot, you can simply ask a volunteer to help give you a replacement ballot and dispose of the original. I know this because I had to do it once. I decided to vote below the line, I filled in over 70 boxes, and at the end I realized I had doubled up on a number somewhere along the line and had to redo the whole thing. I mentioned preferences. Australia has a system called preferential voting. This means that you can put your number 1 vote for Party A and then a number 2 vote for, say, Party B. If the first preference doesn't form a majority, then your preference for number 2 is taken into account, and so far down the line until someone is a clear winner. This way, even if your first party preference doesn't win, it isn't wasted. Your opinion still counts. Preferences can also be incredibly instrumental in determining who wins a seat. And when sometimes elections come down to just a few seats, that means that preferences can decide who is the next Prime Minister and who isn't. So please, research the parties before you cast your vote, because your preferences matter, your vote matters, and knowing who you're voting for is important.
But if you're going to vote below the line, you have to know like 70 different people. That's going to require a lot of research, right?
Quick note, the term for a member of the House of Representatives is 3 years, whereas the term for a senator is 6. So the Senate has this thing called a half election, where half of it goes up to election at the same time as the House of Representatives. That way, the political makeup of our government keeps changing with the times. Technically, the Senate and the House of Representatives don't actually need to have coinciding elections. They just normally do for convenience. So unless there is special circumstances, if you're going to an election, you're going to an election for both of them. There is a thing called a double dissolution. This is where every single seat is up for election, which means the entire Senate. The way that they then resolve the issue of the Senate half election is half the Senate that got the lowest amount of votes only has 3-year terms, and thus the cycle is reset. So now we have senators and members. What do they do? Well, they introduce bills.
Not much, probably. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I'm just assuming based on the American political system. Maybe Australian senators and members get a whole lot done. Let me know in the comments. But also he said he was mentioning term lengths, and I was thinking if I could recall, I was worried I couldn't recall the differences between the House and the Senate in the US. I know that senators have 6-year terms, and members of the House have, it's either 2 or 4-year terms. I'm disappointed I can't remember, but I think it's 2-year terms, I think.
Bills and then they debate them. Bills can originate in either house, unless they are to do with money. Only the House of Representatives can introduce bills to do with money. Once a bill is introduced into the House it started in debates it. If a majority of that House votes in agreement of the bill, it is then passed on to the other House. So two things can
Very similar system in the US. Both houses have to approve a bill.
happen. The first is the majority of the new House says, yes, I love it. It's perfect, just the way you are. And a majority of them are in agreement with it. At which point the Governor General goes, royal assent, I approve, and it has become a law. And the monarch of England goes, I didn't have to lift a finger. Isn't this nice? The second option is the other house goes, actually, could you change a few things? Because we're not super keen on it.
Okay, this is slightly off topic, but has the Governor General ever said, no, I'm not going to sign that, I reject the will of the Australian people or something? Because that would be interesting.
At which point it is going back to the original House to then debate it further. So if one House wants amendments and the other House disagrees, the bill then fails. If a bill introduced by the House of Representatives is knocked back by the Senate and is unsuccessful, then is reintroduced after at least 3 more months, and then is knocked back again, this is what we call a trigger for a double dissolution. The Prime Minister can then choose either whether or not they want to act on it or not, and call a double dissolution election. Though the trigger is not automatic, and so usually when a bill is knocked back, it does not result in a double dissolution election. Often, neither Labour nor the Coalition actually have a majority in the Senate, and this is where we get the crossbench. Actually, we have the crossbench in the House of Representatives too, but this is where the crossbench is more important. The crossbench is comprised of minor parties and independents. So things like the Greens, One Nation, Centre Alliance, other independents, and basically any other party that might arise. Because of the way the Senate is set up, this allows a greater diversity of political representation. Sometimes, if a bill doesn't have partisan support, Labour or the Coalition, depending on who is in power, must go up to another independent and go, hey, please pass my bill, please? If a party that's on the crossbench has enough members to be able to sway whether or not something does or does not pass, they have considered to have the balance of power. So hey, voting for minor parties actually does something, and it does have an effect in the Australian political system.
So do the minor parties always vote on bills, even if there's a party that has enough members to get it passed? Because it was kind of confusing. He was like, if they don't have enough votes, they can approach a minor party to get more votes. But if they were already voting against it, why would they switch sides? So that was kind of the question I'm having.
The government sometimes has to negotiate with these other minor parties and appeal to their interest to get things passed. Sometimes, whether or not something passes comes down just to one person, because the rest of the crossbench is divided, splitting the vote 50-50. So this is why knowing about your minor parties is actually very important, and please do your research before going into an election. And there you have it. It is the rundown of the basics of the Australian federal government. Ta-da! Now this is just the basics. There is a lot to Australian politics, and so I will be
Man, that was just the basics? That was a ton of information.
Making many more videos, some of which are expanding on the topics discussed here, and some about completely different things. So please subscribe, please share this video so other people can learn, and please comment down below to tell me what you would like to learn about next.
Wow, that was an incredibly informative video. Shout out to Ozpol Explained for that. I feel like I've learned so much, like my head is just spinning with all the new information. But yeah, primarily I was surprised to learn that the British monarch is still involved in a minor way with Australian politics, and they have to appoint like a governor general to sign off on bills and stuff. I thought the countries at this point were like completely separate, but apparently that's not the case. Also, the similarities to the British system with the prime minister and having more parties in the elections, that was also interesting to learn. It's interesting how America didn't go the same way. I think we probably wanted more independence from Britain. Oh, yeah, also the mandatory voting. That was really surprising. I didn't know there was like a single country on earth that had that law. And of course, the preferential voting, I think that's a really neat feature. It'd be interesting how we could implement that in the US. I think it would have to probably be on individual issues because, like I said, it's a two-party system here. So, like ranked choice voting for individuals, probably not going to have that much of an effect. But yeah, I feel like I have a pretty good handle on the basics of the Australian government now. So, that's really cool. Let me know if there are any other videos I should react to in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.